So, hello again for anyone who's just joined the chat right now. I'll show you before we start what we're going to work on today. So, if you haven't seen it yet, this is what we're going to work on today. It's very, very similar to what you can see in the Soundcloud app. And as simple as it looks, it's actually not that easy to make. And that's why I'm making this today. Basically, there's a few things involved in what you're seeing right now. It's, showing all the waveforms from the music. So that's something we're going to look at in first place. Then how do you make it move? And also when you tap on the screen, it should just stop. When you play the music, it should just progress automatically. And when you tap, it should stop. And that's when you see the whole waveforms squeezing. So there's a few different things we're going to focus on today. It was really something I didn't know how to make at first. And I was very happy when it was finally working. So let's see how we can do this together, okay? So let me show you my screen. Up. All right, so you should see the phone on the right and the editor on the left. What I really want to start with, I forgot something. Sorry, I never really used that. The first part we're going to work on is the waveforms. And there's something you might not know about is a mask view. And if you don't know about it, it's okay, we're going to go through it together. So let me go back to the coding. I always prepare these slides and I think it's just structure everything better. All right, so as you can see, the code is pretty simple so far. So we have just the status bar that keeps the status bar, the time and all this in white. And inside this app component, I just have a safe error view that keeps the notch away. Inside that view, so we have this black background, okay, very simple. Inside that we have a view that has two waveforms, and that is the interesting part we'll look at right after. The styling is pretty simple, flex one, so it takes the whole space. Justify content center, so it's right in the middle of the screen. And we have this margin left on the side. If I remove it, see, it just so the whole thing starts on the middle of the screen. Now, if we just take a look at the waveform, so you see there's one that is normal and one that is reversed. So that's why we have these two waveforms that are kind of, I don't know how to say, but it's very similar. It's just that they're rotated. So I'll show you how I've done this. It's just a view, so that's a container. And inside that view, you have lots of views. Oh, one thing I forgot to tell you is that I have this get waveforms function that returns a list of values. So you don't really need to understand that. Basically, if you're working with a real life app, you would have real data, but I had to mock up all of this. And all this is doing is returning an array with 150 values in it. So that's very simple. And then this is what you get on the screen, all the different values that we're showing inside waveforms. So what I do is I take this get waveforms and I pass it as a prop to waveforms. And inside here, I just loop through all of them. So all the sticks you see in that component are just normal views. Every stick, if you look at the code, again, very simple. It's a white background, that's why you see it white. The width is defined inside here. So you'll understand why, but I put a few constants here. So each stick is just 2 pixels wide. There's a margin, that's why it's not all next to each other. And then I have this other constant stick full width that we'll use later on, and you'll see why, okay? Now about the reverse thing you saw as the property here, again, very simple. It just basically just change the opacity. So that's why it's not as white as the upper part. And you have a different height because actually in this SoundCloud app, both waveforms are not, do not have the same height. And then I just change the align item so that you have this reversed effect. If I remove this, you'll see what happens. See, just duplicate, but we want it to be in the other direction. All right, so that's pretty simple. And if you don't understand this correctly, don't worry, I will share all the code on GitHub so you can have a look after the live stream. All right. Inversed instead of. Oh yes, that's true. Okay, so I made that mistake. It's inversed. Oof, I did that again. Okay, I call it reversed. That's inversed. Okay, don't pick up on me. Okay, so that's all we have. But as you can see, there's a bit of a problem because we have all these sticks and we want to show an orange background, right? As the song goes on, we want to fill all of this. And to do this, we're going to use a masked view. So I don't know if you've tried that before, but basically the way it works, here there's a really good example. You have a mask element. So when you're using a mask view, it's just like a view, but it behaves a bit differently. So you have a mask element, and you understand in a second how this works, with a text that says basic mask, all right? And below you have all these views that are just flex one with different color as the background. And if you look at the result of that, this is the part we should look at. So you have the mask element, which is some text, basic mask. And what you have inside that mask view is how you should fill all of these letters. So basically, again, the mask element is as if you had to cut something in a piece of paper. So here it's as if you had to cut basic mask, the text, and then you would fill this with different colors. All right. So what we want to do for our app is to cut all the waveforms, and then we want to fill them with some white or orange based on the progress of the song. All right. So it's exactly the same as with text and the colors below, but with sticks and the waveforms and some orange. All right. So for this, you'll see it might be not so difficult. If you don't really understand mask view, you'll see how this works here. So I'll start by importing it. That's the first step. Import mask view from this one. And I will come and add it to the render method. All right, so I'm just looking at my notes. I think we'll just replace this one with the mask view. Actually, we need to keep this one, so we'll just wrap the whole thing with a mask view. All right. Oops. Okay. So as I told you in the previous example, there was the text was the mask element, and here we want the waveforms to be the mask element. So we'll just take all of this and put it as the mask element here. All right. One thing that is important, and they mentioned it in the example, is that we need to keep the background color transparent. Okay, so let's just do that exactly the same here. Oops, I couldn't. Background color transparent. And I think everything else should be fine. Maybe we'll just put this on the outside view. And let's make sure this is taking the full space. So this again works just like a view, and it's going to put the mask element inside it. And then we're going to put some elements inside the mask view to have the white and orange colors. Okay, so height and width 100. Okay, what do we get after this actually? Okay, we don't see anything. I think that's normal actually. Let me just try to add a view here that is flex one and has background color orange. Okay, so see, this is how it works. Oh, sorry, I just have a look at the chat. Naming variables, programmer's namer. Yeah, exactly. Hi, Centurion. Oh, it's good to see you, Centurion. Good to see you. So as you can see, this is how the mask view works. You have the mask element, all the waveforms, all the sticks, and then what you put inside here, it's just going to fill what you have cut with the mask element. Okay, so if I say red here, just going to fill everything with red, etc. If you see the waveforms changing every time, it's just because fast refresh is just recreating this every time, so we get new values. but here really just the color is changing, okay? So in our case, we're just going to need to do this based on the current progress of the song, right? So to do this, we'll need two things. We don't want the whole thing to be white or orange. We want to be white by default, and then based on the current progress, we want to fill all the sticks with some orange. Okay, so the default one will be white. Oops, white. Again, if something's not clear, please say it in the chat. And what we want, so just imagine this is taking the whole space, okay? And we want to put another view on top of it that will work pretty much the same. So it's going to be position absolute because we want to put it on top of the array view. So position absolute, z index of 1 because we really want it to be on top of it. And I'll just say background color. So wait, it's a bit of complex color. That's the one from Soundcloud 5836. And we shouldn't have anything yet because it's position absolute, but we didn't set any, any size. So let's put it left 0, so it sticks on the left side. Bottom 0, so that's full height. Top 0. And if we do, let's say, width 10%, okay, just to see if it works. See, you can see it's already starting to fill the white sticks. All right, and if I do 20%, it's going to go 20%, etc. Okay, if I go 100, you get it. All right, so to make it work, we'll need to play with this a little. So based on the current movement, as we go from left to right, we should fill in this part, but we'll see this in the second part of this live stream. All right, so I think we have all the building blocks to do the next part. I hope this part is clear because if you haven't played with Mass View before, it might not be. I hope it is. All right, if everything's clear, we can just move to the second part. So what we're going to do now is to make it all move, all right? And as you might know already, we're going to use a pan gesture handler. If you're unfamiliar with this, don't worry. Again, I'll just go through all of this with you. So basically, pan gesture handler is something that comes from the React Native gesture handler library. And now we can just interpolate the width. Actually, you'll see. We don't even need interpolation in this case, but you'll see how I do it. Also, there's probably other ways of doing this stuff. So let's just see. So the pan gesture handler, what is that? I will start just by import it from the library. Okay, from React Native gesture handler. I will just import it here, pan gesture handler. This is just something that basically say, for example, if you want this view to be interactive, you're just going to wrap it with a pan gesture handler. And then you're going to say, okay, if someone touches that view, what should happen? All right, what's the logic behind it? And this is exactly what we're going to do. The only difference in our case is that we want this whole mass view to be interactive. So it's not going to be this view, but we're going to put the pan gesture handler around the mass view. All right. Now inside a pan gesture handler, that's just a rule. You need to put a view. So that just, if I run this, it's not going to work. I really need to pass it a view. And it doesn't have to be, it can't be just a regular view. It has to be an animated one. If you're unfamiliar with this, I really encourage you to watch more videos on my channel that really explains how animation works with React Native. So let me import this from Reanimated. That's just a better version of animated. All right. And it's not just animated, it's animated.view. All right. So ooh, that's not good. We got their building blocks and we need to make it flex 1 just so it takes the whole space. So now if I refresh all that, it's not going to change anything because we're not setting what this handler should do. So it might just listen to gestures, but it's not going to do anything. We have to let it know what you should do with the gesture. Okay, so to do this, we need to create a gesture handler here. So let's create it, pan gesture handler. And this time it's going to use a hook from Reanimated. I think it's use animated gesture handler. And this will define what should happen when we do a pan movement, pan gesture on the mask view here. Okay, so I'll just grab this and attach it on gesture event. So that's how you connect the logic with the pan gesture handler component. And then what matters is what we put inside. So that's really the difficult part. Okay, so what we're going to put inside this is the different steps that you have in a movement. So whenever you have a gesture, it starts, then it goes to active mode. Okay, we're moving the finger on the screen, and then the end event. So that's when you stop, you release your finger. Okay, so you have 3 different hooks that constitutes every movement. So the way it works in Reanimated is you're gonna have on start, so that's when the movement, the gesture starts. On active, well, that's when it's active, okay? And on end. And you'll see we'll put different things inside of these. Okay, so someone say, why didn't wrap mask element with gesture? Actually, that's it. That's a good thought. Both are possible. You could definitely, I think, I'm not so sure. I did this way, but either way, I think it's going to work. Okay, I just did this way. The other way would be correct as well. I just have to make a decision. It's just that the mask view is taking the whole screen, so I just said, okay, let's wrap the whole thing with a pan gesture holder. I hope that makes sense. So back to the hooks. So you have 3 different callbacks: when it starts, when it's active, when it ends, and we're going to put different things in there. What I'll start by writing is the example you get from the documentation, and I'll explain it right after. So this is exactly what you might see in the documentation. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention something. I was about to use something that I haven't declared. Basically, the way it works is that you're going to declare the logic, but you have to keep somewhere where is the current touch on the screen. Okay, because if you move the finger, you have to say, okay, now we update the value where on maybe 10 pixels on the right. Okay, update this value that contains the current position of the touch. And to do so, usually in React, you'd have a state, but with Reanimated, we use shared values. If you have some experience with animated, just a regular thing from React Native, you probably know animated values. That's exactly the same. So I will create a value. And again, if you're very unfamiliar with this, I'm pretty sure it's going to make a lot of sense very soon. So by default, this value is 0. And as we move on the screen, this value will change. All right, so it's just like a state, really. That's how you should see it. So when it starts, we're going to say context start X. And you might be thinking, what is this context? And don't worry, I'll explain very quickly. Here it was pan X value equals. So that's the part, as we move the touch on the screen, it's going to update this value, just like a state, really. Context start X plus event translation. Oh, we don't have this yet, so let me add it. Event context. Any particular reason for not using TypeScript? Well, I use it all the time personally. It's just that I always think maybe someone doesn't use it yet and is watching the stream and might not understand. It's already complex with animations and all this. I really want to keep things simple, but I totally agree. It would be better with TypeScript. All right, so this is really the default example you'll see if you go into documentation. And the way this works, it's not so difficult, you'll see. Basically here, this is the first really important part. Whenever you're moving your finger on the screen, it's going to update this. So again, see it just as a this.set state, and you're updating the state as you're moving on the screen. And what you're setting here is at this value, that is the distance you've made between the moment you start the gesture and where you are right now. So let's say you just touch anywhere on the screen and you move 10 pixels on the right, translation X will equal to 10. Okay, if you move it to 10, 20 pixels, it's going to be 20, etc. The problem is that this value is always related to the current gesture, meaning that, for example, if you made a gesture 20 pixels on the right, then you release your gesture and you start again, and you move maybe 30 pixels on the right, it's just going to be 30 pixels. It's not going to be 20. So what you want is to actually, whenever you start a new movement, you want to store somewhere what's the current value of our touch. And then whenever we have this value that is just relative to the current movement, we want to add this constant. That is, where was our touch before we start this new touch? So that, I mean, I hope it's clear, just that if you didn't have this, it would always start from the beginning again. Okay, so if this is 10, then it's just going to scroll back to 10. It's not going to take in consideration where you were before making that new gesture. Actually, I think this is not going to do much because we're updating this value, but we're not updating any styling anywhere. And the way it works with Reanimated is that you need some Reanimated style. So let me show you how you can do this. Basically what we want to do is, as we move our touch on the right or on the left, we want to add a transformation to, let me see which part. Couldn't find it, hold on. Yeah, we want to add it here. So let me show you. Basically what we want to do is to have something like that. Translate X, and if I say 10, I need to refresh the app. Give me a second. I'll just put it back to 0 so you can see the difference. All right, maybe if I say minus 100. Okay, so see, as we move, we want to update this value. And that's very handy at this point because we have this panX value that records how far we moved on the x-axis, on the horizontal axis. And we can use this here, so it automatically maps the gesture and keeps translating this view. So for that, I'll need to create an animated style. So I'll just call it mask animated style. And you quickly see how all the pieces come into place. With animated style and reanimated, you have this hook, use animated style, that returns an object that is exactly what you have in a regular styling in React Native. So if you say, like, for example, opacity 0, that is just a regular style, okay? But what we want here is to have an animated style. So to do this, I want to do exactly what I had here, transform, and we'll pass it translate X. And here we can use the panX value that we had there. So it might be a bit weird for you to do this, right? If it's the first time, but I'll just show you how it looks like. All right, so just add it here, refresh. And now as I move on my screen, see, it just adds the transform. So we have a problem. We can move way too far, right? But see, it's already working. So we need to put some boundaries, etc. But it's already working. All right. Okay, we'll add a bit more stuff here for the boundaries, but this already looks fine. And see, maybe I can show you what would happen if we don't have this. You might understand. I think I need to refresh every time I make changes to this. Again, don't hesitate to stop me if something's not clear, okay? So now I'm moving and I release and then I start again, and see, it starts all over. See, every single time. And that's because if you don't use context, it forgets where it was before. And that's why when we start a new movement, we say context start X equals current panX value. And then we add it every time we're inside there. So it remembers where it was before starting this new gesture. Okay, so I'll just put it back. Okay, it's working. Is this going to be recorded as Christian? Every time it's recorded, and you can find it on the channel a few hours later. So don't worry. And also there will be the code and everything. So, all right. So we got somewhere, but we can't see, on SoundCloud, when you move, you see it filling with orange in the background. And that's why I explained everything to you earlier with this. And we're going to be able to make it working. So again, we have this Panics value, and we're going to use it to see where we are on the screen to fill this view with orange. All right. So to do so, it's not going to be so difficult. We'll need another animated style because it's going to be a style property that changes based on Panics value. And because Panics value is a shared value, you can't just say, you can't put the styling right in there. You need to use an animated style to hook, to connect both things together. Okay. So here, because I want to change the width of this view based on Panics value, I need to use an animated style. So let's call it played animated style. Use animated style. And once again, this only returns an object. As I told you, we're going to play with the width. Maybe I should just do this. So this equals -1 times, it's the same, it's just a shortcut. Okay, and I'll pass it to here. We use an array, otherwise we can't pass it. And let's see what we get. Okay, so it's working here, but I feel like you can't see my screen. Hold on. So as always, for those who are not familiar, there's always some problems, but okay, here we are. See, it's all coming into place. So now as I move, it's filling the background part with the mask element. All right. So you have this weird thing now because there's no boundaries. You can really go really far. We're going to fix that, don't worry. But see, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool already. All right. All right. So now it's working, but as I said, we need boundaries. So for example, I shouldn't be able to, go this far, right? It should just stop right in the middle. And here it should stop at this point, right? Shouldn't go any further. All right. So to make this, again, it's very, very simple, as you'll see. Also, I forgot to explain really this part. Maybe it's unclear why I say -1 times this. Basically, if you move on the right, to move on the right, you need to move your finger on the left. And that's a bit counterintuitive, but that's what you're doing. So basically, the movements, the transform will be negative, because if I move on the left, then you go from a position 0 to -10, -20, etc. as you move on the left side. So if I said width equals Panics value, it will be width equals a negative value, right? But what you want is, if you're at 0, it shouldn't show anything. If you're at 10 pixels, it should fill the whole thing for 10 pixels. But because it's going to be -10, you want to multiply this by -1. So that's why I put this minus sign in front of it. I hope everything's clear. So now back to the boundaries part. Guys, you need to tell me, I don't see any comment. I'm really worried it's not clear, or maybe it's that it's too clear, so that would be good. But you have to let me know if it's, I don't have feedback. Okay, so for the boundaries, what we need to do is here, instead of always updating Panics value, we want to say, okay, are we allowed to go this far? So instead of updating straight away, we want to say, are we too far? If so, don't do anything. And if not, just fill the whole part, right? So we need some conditions there. Everything is clear, thank you. Oh, cool, okay. But it's just, I'm facing my screen and I'm not so sure, because when you're in a classroom, you see people nodding or totally lost, so you can tell, but here it's so different. Cool guys, thank you. All right, so back to the boundaries. Basically, as I said, instead of straight away updating this, we want to check if the next value is going to be outside of the boundaries. So instead of updating straight away, let's put this inside next panx, okay? And here we're going to have some conditions. So we're just too amazed how easy it is. It's easy after you had some, after you went through, after you went through the thought process. When you do it, it's not that simple, right? So the first thing we need to check is when we have this situation, okay? So here we're at 0, and if I go on the left, we're basically going to positive, right? As I told you, when we go on the left, it's going to be negative, and if I go past here, it's going to be positive. So if the next pan x is superior to 0, well, instead of saying pan x dot value equals next pan x, we just want to say, okay, keep it at 0, don't go any further. So let's do pan x value equals 0. Another condition we need, because at this point, then we won't be able to move anymore, because then there's not the pan x dot value equals something. So we need another condition, and this one will be when we're past this moment, right? When we're here, we shouldn't be able to keep going, right? It should just stop there. I will write the code for this, and I will explain it right after, because again, it might not be very clear. Pan x dot value equal max pan x, and for that I also need to define what max pan x is. Just give me a second. Max pan x equals, nope, that's not correct. All right, we need something. I'm adding a lot of stuff, but don't worry, I will go through each step so you understand what's happening. All right. So what I'm doing here is a bit arbitrary, but you kind of need this at some point. What I'm doing here is I get the full dimension of the screen, and the reason for that is that in SoundCloud, for some reason, when you hear, that's the default position, and actually the last point you can be at is the width of your screen. So you can basically only scroll. So here I'm scrolling half of my screen, and then I'm scrolling for the other half. And so what I want to do is to say, is to check when we're past this distance. So this distance should be the full width of the screen, right? Because this is 100%. Remember, I had the margin left 50%, but the whole thing here we see in white is 100%. So that's the width of my screen. And so all I should be checking is, are we past the width of my screen or not with pan x? So what I have here, the max pan x variable is what is the width of my screen. And again, I put a negative because pan x is going to be negative as we go on the right. So the maximum value we can get from for pan x is the width of our screen. Okay, again, negative because pan x is going to be negative. And so now that you understand this part, if we look at this here, we're just checking if the next pan x value, so that's the current position on our screen, is lower than the maximum value, okay? And if it's lower, that means we're past this point. And I know this is misleading because again, these are negative values. So we would rather say, if this is bigger than max pan x, then keep it at max pan x. That's how you would set a boundary. But again, we're working with negative values, so we're using the opposite sign. All right, so we have our two boundaries. I haven't refreshed yet, but that's the next pan x superior to 0, just keep it at 0. If it's lower than max pan x, keep it at max pan x. And the last case is just, oh, someone told me I missed the dot value. Where? Next pan x dot value. Oh, because no, this is not a shared value. So we don't need the value here. It's just a regular variable. You only need dot value when you're using shared value. So if you want to get the value for panics, you're going to say panics.value. Otherwise, you don't need it. Okay, so the last part here is panics.value equals what we had before. So you know we had panics value equals all this. So it's just going to be next panics. All right. Let me refresh everything, and I think this time it's going to be much better because we won't be able to go past this point. So now you can't see it, but I'm really trying hard to go on the left, and see I can't. If I go on the other side, same thing happens. I just get stuck there. So that's exactly what we want, right? And see, what I really love about all of this is that with just simple logic, we were able to make this, and it's not a big deal once you have it, but see, it just works. Okay, I think we're good with the second part, and we'll be good to go to the final part. So today, just 3 parts, not 4 parts. I'm about to be out of breath. Okay, I'm just thinking if there's something else, but I think that's all right. Okay. Let me show you what we're going to do in the last part. So what we want to do here is the play or not to play part, which is when you tap on the screen. So if I show you the final result again, this is what we want. So this is normal, okay? And when you tap, see, the whole thing just squeezes back to be very small, right? Maybe you'll see it again in a second. See, when I tap, it just all squeeze in. And then when I tap again, just goes back to normal. The only thing you might not really see clearly on this part is that if you're not touching your screen and if it's playing, it should automatically keep scrolling. So without us touching the screen, it should just keep scrolling. So in this part, we'll see how to do these 2 things, and I hope everything will be clear. So let me jump back to the code. All right. So the first question you should ask yourself is, how do I detect a touch on the screen, right? As we're working with Reanimated, you're not going to be able to use just a regular touchable. You're going to need to use tap gesture handler, which is just something else to detect touches with Reanimated and gesture handler. Okay, so let me first import it from gesture handler. Tap gesture handler. Again, this is exactly like a touchable, but for these libraries. And because we want to check when someone is touching the screen here, I just wrap the whole thing again with that. And if you remember earlier, I said when you have the pan gesture handler, you need to put an animated view inside it. So that's exactly the same thing here. Let me put animated.view. And again, just going to be flex1. And let's wrap everything with it. All right. So if I refresh, nothing should happen at all because we need to add a gesture handler here. So that's exactly what we did with the pan gesture handler, but this time we're going to do with this one. And you'll see it's really much simpler. So we have on gesture event and we don't have the gesture handler yet. So let me make it here. Tap gesture handler, and you'll see really the logic will be just the same. Use animated gesture handler, and here we just want to say when we tap, so then that's when the gesture is active, do something. Okay, so we don't need on start or on end. And by the way, this one here we have on end. We didn't put anything yet here, but I will add it later. Maybe I should start by doing this. Okay, maybe I should start by doing this. Sorry, I'm thinking at the same time. Maybe we should do this before we continue. Basically, there's one problem you don't really see on screen because the sticks are very, they're not really wide. But if I stop here, for example, right in the middle, okay, I can stop in the middle of a stick. And that's a problem because we want every time when we release the touch, we want it to snap to the nearest stick. So if I stop it, let's say here in the middle, I would want it to just scroll back to maybe the previous one. So in a way, when we stop on a stick, if it's in the middle of it, we want to snap back to the nearest stick on screen. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And the way to do this is that when you release the touch, you should do something here. You should update panic's value based on what's the nearest stick you have on screen. And so to do this, you just need to say panic's value equals, and here we need to find the value for panic's, which is where's the nearest stick. To do this, I created this helper function. So you can see worklet. If you don't know what a worklet is, it's just a function that you will run on the UI thread. This is used internally by Reanimated because basically the way Reanimated works, if you don't know, is that it's running all the animations, all the computation in a different box than your React Native app is usually using. So that's why it's very smooth on every device, because it's just running in a different box. And so when you say worklet, it just says run this whole code on the different box. Okay. So this is a helper. You don't really need to understand it, but it just helps you to find the nearest multiple. As you can see, all the sticks have the same width. So when I stop here, I just want to see, okay, we're maybe 100 pixels on the right. Where is the nearest multiple of the width of a stick? Okay. So that's just math. If you don't understand it, well, maybe you're a bit like me. You were not good in maths before, but you'll see what I mean. Okay, so I'll just use that. I need to update it here and use it find nearest multiple, and it will take the current panic's value. So that's the value maybe where we stopped in the middle of a stick, and the multiple will be stick full width. And if you were there earlier, you know this value equals to the width of a stick and the margin on the right. So what I'm doing is just find the nearest stick position on this. If I just save, oh yeah, that's because, hold on, maybe I just add this one. I forgot to add it before. Okay, so you might see there's a tiny, now when I release, there's a tiny bump because it tries to just snap back to the nearest stick, right? I think you can see it on your screen. The only problem I think is that it's a bit harsh, you know. You release and snaps back straight away. We might want to animate this a little. So to do this, nothing simpler with Reanimated. You need to wrap the whole thing with timing. What it does is run a timed animation to update this value. So instead of saying panic's value equals the next value, it's going to slowly move to that value. You also have with spring, which is a common one. If you want to have a spring animation, that will make the whole thing kind of bouncy. Timing is just a very simple animation over time. So if I hit save, and I do the same thing again, see, it's not as harsh as it used to be. When you release, it just slowly moves back, right? So you can't really see it all the time, but I hope it's clear on the screen. Okay, so that was really just one last thing I wanted to do. For the tap gesture handler, here we are. Basically, all of this is going to do is to check whenever you tap this gesture handler, it's going to update a shared value that says, are we playing or not? Okay, so to keep this somewhere, we just need to say const playing equals use shared value. So again, it's going to be a value that will be updated by gesture handlers. And by default, we're not playing. And when we're inside onActive, we're going to update this value. So playing that value, because it's a shared value, and just set it to the opposite of the current value. So if it's true, it's going to be false. If we tap again, it's going to be true, etc. Just toggles the value playing. At this point, it's not going to do anything except updating this value. So what we need is to update the styling. If you remember the final result, the whole thing would shrink and squeeze. We need to make that thing based on playing. All right, so let me see how we can make that. Okay. I talk so much, like my throat is... I'm really dying. Okay. So what we have here in the waveform, so remember the waveforms component just shows all these sticks. We have some height here that is set to 50 or 40 pixels. But what we want is when we play or when we stop, yeah, I drink a lot of water, trust me. When we press play or pause, everything should shrink. So basically the height should change, right? And instead of setting the height here, we could put it here. We could have views here. So let me just show you what's the idea. Height 50, okay. Just grab the first one, and the second one will be exactly the same, but height equals 40. All right. So let me just change this to height 100%, so that it will take the whole space it has. And see, it's pretty terrible, but as soon as I add these wrappers around this view around, it'll just put it back in place, okay? So we get the same thing. And you might wonder, what's the point? Why do you do this? Well, the thing is, as we now have a listener for the tap gesture handler, we want to change, we want to play with the styling of these views and set it, instead of having height 50 pixels, we want to say height 1 pixel, for example, or height 0. And we can do this with animated styles and shared values. So I'll show you in a second how this works. So basically we're going to need to replace these two. And to do so, we need two animated styles. One will be for the first one will be for the second one. So let me just add these two. Oh, also I forgot to add this here, number of taps. You can also use this tap gesture handler for detecting double taps, three taps, etc. You just need to say, okay, this gesture handler should only listen to single taps. Okay, so as I told you, two animated style, top waves, animated style, which will be animated style. I think you're getting used to it. And again, this returns just a style object. And as I told you, we're going to play with the height. And here, the logic will be very, very simple. If we're playing, well, keep it at 50 pixels. That was the original value. Otherwise, just 1. Okay, so it will be very, very little. For the other one, actually, I can just copy paste this. Bottom waves. The difference here, it's going to be 40. And yeah, let's just keep it at 1 pixel as well. So now we can use these two animated style here, but remember it's animated style, so I need animated view. So I'll make an update here. Animated. Just a quick question for the people watching. Is there, like, how much do you know about Reanimated? Because I can also adapt to who's watching. I always try to keep it simple for everybody, but just let me know, how good are you with Reanimated? What's your knowledge about it? Okay, so we have animated views, and I will, instead of setting the height like this, I will just say top waves animated style, and this one will get the bottom one. Bottom waves animated style. Okay, let me hit save and see, by default, because we're not playing, we have this, so you can't really see very well, but it's just 2 pixels high, okay? And if I tap, so if I tap, then we're going to update this one. Okay, so let me tap. See, it jumps back to the other value. So, okay, that's pretty good, but we should animate this, right? It's pretty, I mean, no, it's not pretty at all. So we need to animate it a little. And to do this, we can use just like what we had before with timing. So it works exactly the same. We can wrap the whole thing here with timing. And if I hit save again, see, now it's much smoother, isn't it? All right, I think we've come a long way already. It's pretty cool, and see, you can do it as fast as you want, and it doesn't slow down anything. Okay. Whew, okay. So I think that's pretty good. I love how much more sense Reanimated 2 makes compared to the Reanimated 1 and Animated. That's true. I mean, they really did a good work at this. Oksana, I'm not very good. I am learning a lot right now. Type of content is the best for me. Cool. Okay. Look, I really hope this is helpful. That's why I do it. So I'm glad you're learning a lot of things. All right. I see we're close to 1 hour, so let's finish with the last part of this, which is, when it's playing. So when it's not playing, should be, just like that. And when it's playing, it should automatically progress, right? So to do so, it's really, really simple, as you'll see. I know I say that a lot, but I mean it. You'll see it's very simple. Basically, we're going to have a function called update progress. So for now, it's just going to be empty. And what we want to do is to, as soon as we mount the component, we want to call this every, let's say, 150 milliseconds. So it's just something that's constantly going to be called, and that should just check, okay, should it play? And if so, you should just do something like this automatically. So now I'm doing it with my finger, but it should do it automatically when we're not sliding ourselves, okay? So what I'll do here is something very usual in React. We'll set an interval to call a function. It's going to be update progress, and just call it every 150 milliseconds. And as always with use effect, you need to return the cleanup function. So clear interval. If you don't know really how this works, it just cleans the interval when the component unmounts, okay? So in this case, it's app. So unless you close the app, it's not going to unmount, but just to keep things clear. Anyways, so this is just going to call this function every 150 milliseconds. But for now, this doesn't do much, right? Again, what it should do is update panics when we're not touching the screen, right? When it's playing and when we're not touching the screen. So it's going to update panics value. And because panics value, again, is a shared value, you can't do this in a regular function. You need to do it inside a worklet function, because again, that's how Reanimated works. It's not going to understand it because Reanimated runs in a different box. So you need to say this function, if it runs in a different box, is not just a regular function, it's a worklet function. So here, what we're going to do is if we're playing, so we need to check for this. Well, we're going to update panics value automatically. And what we could do is to say panics.value minus stick full width. Okay, so you might be thinking, what is that? Again, I think I've said that so many times. Panics value is negative, all right? So if I say panics value plus this, so stick full width is the width of the whole, thing. I think you understood that. It's just going to go backwards, right? Every 150, it's just going to go like that. And we want to move in different directions, so that's why we need to say minus, all right? I missed a message from Amir. Thank you, it was very useful. As I tweeted, please share the initial. Oh, I think I forgot to answer you, Amir. Okay, don't worry, I will answer you after the live stream. Actually, for anyone who's watching this, the code will be on GitHub, but also the initial version of the project will be on GitHub. So you can, if you want to start from scratch and rewatch everything, or it's really up to you, you'll have the final version and the initial version I worked with all of you at the beginning of the stream. Okay. So if we're playing update panics value, all right. But if we do this, as I mentioned earlier, we need to say this is a timed animation. Otherwise, it's just going to jump like boop, 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 like that, right? We don't want it. we want to slightly animate all this. So let's do what we do best, add with timing everywhere. All right. You know what? Actually, let's run this and see how it looks like. So we're not playing. So actually at this point, it's calling update progress, but because this returns false, it's not doing anything. If I go playing, it starts moving. But there's one problem here. The first one is as I move, oh, actually, see, as I'm, like right now I'm holding on the screen, but because I'm holding, it's calling onActive from pan gesture handler here, and it's also trying to update here. So we need to have a way to say when we're sliding, don't do this, okay? It's only when it's playing and we're not sliding that it should just go forward. And the other problem is if we go past this point, as you'll see, it will keep increase the pan x value. So we need also to check if we're not past the max pan x value, because that's just two things, and actually we'll be done with the project for today. So the first one is, let's do the simple part, is to check, are we sliding? And we'll do exactly the same thing as we did with playing. By default, we're not sliding, and this should be updated when we're here. So when we start to move the screen like this, we should set sliding.value equals true. When we stop the gesture, well, you get it, just sliding.value equals false, right? So now we have this shared value. We can use it here and just say, if we're playing and we're not sliding, then do this. And as I told you, the last problem is if we're past a certain point, we shouldn't go any further, right? Shouldn't just keep like that. And this is very similar to what we had over here. So I'll just add some code and explain to you. So if panx.value is bigger than max pan x, this is actually the opposite. So here we're just checking if we're not to the final point yet. If we're not there yet, okay, keep scrolling. If we are past this point, stop. All right. So I just hit save. And now we can try the two problems we had. So the first one is when we're playing and I move around, it shouldn't update. See if I release it, just starts from this point. So that's working. And the last one is if we're past a certain point, it shouldn't go beyond that point. And this is working as well. Okay. Look, I'm happy to say it's 4 here, 4 p.m. and everything's done. So yeah, I guess we're done. I think there's nothing else. I'm just looking at the chat. What happens if you use useState instead of shared value? That's a really good question. Basically, I think it just goes back to having these two boxes. If you're going to work with shared values at some point, so that's what we have with panx, you just want to keep everything inside the same box, all right? Because otherwise you're going to say, you're in that other box, but take that other value from the different box, and it's just going to be not as smooth because it's as if you had two toolboxes and you all constantly, using tools from one and for the other, if that makes sense. So you just try to keep all the animation, all the gesture logic on the UI thread, which comes with shared values, with animation, gesture handler, etc. And all that comes, should be done, in my opinion, inside Worklet. It's not impossible to do it with states, but it's just that, only these parts are using shared values. So why would you want to have a state that, generate re-renders and all that? You want all of this to run on the UI thread. So that's why I'm using a shared value here. Yeah, exactly. Poor said it very well. All right. I won't take any more of your time, but before we end, as always, it's kind of a ritual. You get to decide what we're going to do next week. And so, as you'll see, there's two options, as always. What's for next Friday? The first one is the alphabet scroll. So maybe if you don't have an iPhone, you don't really know how this works, but it's just that when you move your finger on the right, so you have all the letters from the alphabet, you automatically jumps to a different section of the scroll view on the left side. So it's interesting, and we could do that with Reanimated as well. It has some interesting gestures. Otherwise, we have the beloved Reddit. Has been out there for, I think it's been 3 times already, and every time people decide to go with the other one. So you get to choose. You just tell me, do you want to see the alphabet scroll, just the alphabet or scroll, or the Reddit part? I always find it funny because, I'm pretty sure there's people coming in and they leave after maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes, and they always forget or miss this part. Although that's pretty cool. You get to give your opinion and decide. Reddit, please. Okay. Look, I'm surprised. I think it's it's the first time we get more Reddits than the other one. Okay, that's cool. Cool. Then, yeah, Reddit's been defeated 3 times. Okay, so let's go for Reddit next time. I hope you had a good time, everyone. For me, I'm out of breath, but I'm really happy if that helped you. I will leave you with the final screen, as always. So that's this one. Thanks for joining. See you next Friday. Again, same time, same place. Thanks for being here, really, and have a good weekend. Bye.